Is space-time a trick of your brain? Can another reality exist outside the mind? On this intriguing journey, we will explore the very essence of reality, questioning whether time and space are objective entities or mere inventions of the human mind. As physics unravels the secrets of the universe, we are discovering the reality of space-time. Forget the world you have known until now, because what lies behind the veil that has been hidden from you is more exciting than you ever imagined. Scientists have finally revealed the nature of space-time. Today you are going to reach the frontiers of knowledge, where the latest brain findings have revealed something surprising. In our daily lives we move in three-dimensional space-time and forward time. It's like being stuck in a cube where we can't get out, and with a clock that tells the hours. Is this cube real or an invention of the mind? In history there have been great surprises as physics developed. Newton argued that space was a fixed three-dimensional entity, and time passed uniformly and constantly throughout the universe. What there was a cosmic clock, and in some ways that is what it seems from our point of view. Gottfried Leibniz considered that the universe was made up of a single substance, and that it existed independently of the observer, and that space and time were only relations between objects. The reality of our space-time came from the hand of Albert Einstein, who revolutionized everything we knew. In the theory of special relativity, Einstein proposed that space and time are intertwined in an entity called space-time, and that its nature can change depending on the observer and the relative speed between objects. At that time it was not fully understood. If space-time changed, it meant that they were not absolute. What is the true nature of reality? Without an observer, there is no space or time? Now we have new clues about how our brain interprets space and time. And that is why we are going to do something different. We are going to delve into neuroscience to try to unravel this mystery. We are beings who need to locate ourselves in a three-dimensional space and be able to establish distances and relationships between objects. At the same time we see the passing of events and how everything evolves, what we call time. Edward Tolman did experiments with rats placed in a maze to see if they were able to become aware of their surroundings or if there was some independent cognitive process. The result was surprising, and the rats created a cognitive map in their brain to recognize the place, even if they had never been there. John O'Keefe discovered that cognitive map. It was housed in a region of neurons in the hippocampus, exactly in the entorhinal cortex, called place cells. All mammals have these cells, and they are responsible for encoding information to be able to orient ourselves through space. These cells remain in memory until they are reactivated again when entering another place. Other cells called network cells are those that organize the information in space so that a coherent map can be created in our mind. So we have two types of cells. On the one hand, place cells that are activated from the first moment we see the world around us. So we already have a three-dimensional mental map. Then the grid cells that activate at regular intervals as we explore, and that way we get hexagonal patterns, exactly a cube with hexagonal grids. This means that we establish connections with the cells of the hippocampus, as if it were a kind of interface that shares information between both structures. These cells located in the hippocampus not only encode information and guide us through space, but they also control time and our memory. Have you ever wondered why a certain place can trigger a certain memory? Here is the answer. Our mental map is cells in a grid that create a mosaic of whatever space we are in. And when we change to a new space, the mosaic changes, but not the grid, which represent three fixed spatial dimensions. Imagine how this is encoded in your mind. You walk through a room and each neuron in the network activates immediately. If you are 3 away, a different neuron is activated. On the other hand, if you go outside, the long-distance neurons are activated. 10, 15, 50 m, any location in space causes network neurons to activate. This is surprising, since it is as if we were in a video game, and we are simply an interface that interprets the stimuli into signals that create the mental map. Although we do not notice it, a combination of multiple signals interpret a three-dimensional world with cells in localized places. So the big question is, what would happen if those network neurons were not activated in time? The conclusion is clear. We would have cognitive problems establishing distances. Even our model of the world would change. We would see different objects or people that others do not see. This is what happens to many people with psychiatric problems, some recognized and others not. If our sophisticated interface fails, we cannot process the information. According to the World Health Organization, 25% of the world's population has a mental disorder, and this cannot be fixed by putting needles into the brain. That includes some Nobel Prize winner. The cube with hexagonal grids created in our mind has some surprising properties. It looks like a Newtonian image of space itself with fixed coordinates determined by placed neurons. This confuses us and makes us believe that space and time are absolute. If we add human egocentrism to this concept, it is not surprising to believe that we are convinced that the reality we see is absolute, and that it is the only valid one to understand space-time. According to relativity, space-time is relative and is established as a relationship between objects and distances. However, our brain deceives us and makes it feel absolute. But according to our biology, it is the best system to understand the world. We need fixed frames of reference to orient ourselves around the grid while the tiles that represent the cells of our mind change. Newton and other great scientists based their knowledge on the intuition of their senses, without suspecting that the hippocampus and brain neurons are programmed to give a virtual image of space. There is still much more. Time follows the same mental scheme. Einstein showed that time depends on the speed at which we move in gravity. A spaceship moving at 99% of the speed of light, time will pass more slowly than for a person on the ground, although in the ship time will seem to pass at the same speed. So how is this possible? Simply because we all carry an internal clock in our mind that travels with us. Although this internal clock is slower than another, we have time receptors in our neurons that balance so that we always perceive time as it is and that it does not change. Like placed neurons, we are trapped in a cube with hexagonal cells and with a clock that seems to go at the same speed into the future. In this way we can orient ourselves in space, whether in a spaceship, on another planet, or in an airplane. With our fine-tuned time receiver, although accuracy varies from other clocks, there is no one-size-fits-all clock. Researchers at the Neuroscience Systems Institute at the Trondheim University of Science and Technology in Norway have made a surprising discovery. We have a network of brain cells that control our sense of time and our memories. The brain area is in the lateral entorhinal cortex next to the medial entorhinal cortex, where the spatial dimension is. This region of the hippocampus works on a spatio-temporal plane, so we can recognize the past, present, and future. Living organisms, including humans, have several internal biological clocks to keep track of time. Hippocampal timing cells, which form a signal chain much like dominoes, scan precisely every 10 seconds at 0.02 to 600 cycles per second. There are populations of neurons that activate in synchrony. That is, we collect the information we see and organize it in our mind through our circadian rhythm, which is also filled with our memories. That is the reason why we all seem to perceive time the same even though it is not absolute. Additionally, your brain has a kind of internal clock called theta cycle, which is like an internal coordinating rhythm. Imagine that your brain has a series of cells that act as a kind of map to represent where you are or what you are doing. From time to time, these cells are activated in a specific order. In this process, cells that represent what you recently did are activated first, then those that represent your current location, and then those that represent the places you plan to go next. That way we can coordinate our time and movements, and we are good at guessing how much time has passed in several seconds thanks to our internal clock. However, our accuracy worsens over longer periods of time, and our sense of time is shorter when you are entertained or having fun. It seems to be longer when you are younger, and when you get older it gets shorter and shorter. There is even more to this. Did you know that for brief moments our mind can freeze time? Valery Makarov, researcher at the Interdisciplinary Mathematics Institute of the Complutense University of Madrid, tells us that time can be compacted in our minds, eliminating time and converting it into space. This happens when we must make difficult decisions immediately. Our brain in a single second can convert the entire movie into a single frame that allows you to understand the entire movie. That's why we can drive, hunt, and play certain sports. This is significant and gives us to understand that the perception of our time varies and has nothing to do with Newton's cosmic clock. We have seen how the brain interprets space-time in a grid of cells with an internal clock, And this is where things get very interesting. To understand it, imagine that your brain is like a very advanced GPS. When you walk or move, your brain not only registers where you are in space, but also when you are in that place. Now scientists have discovered that some cells in your brain act like little stopwatches, marking time rather than just location. For example, in experiments with rats running in a wheel, they found that certain brain cells activated in order as if they were tracking time, rather than the position of the rat. They also discovered that these cells can be activated not only by new places, but also by the passage of time. Think of these cells as a kind of travel diary for your brain. With each brain pulse beat, these cells record your current location, then remember recent places, and finally anticipate future places on your route. This suggests that these cells are not only related to space and time specifically, but are also involved in following each other as a detailed plan of your movements. In each pulse of this cycle, place cells activate in rapid sequence, creating a pattern that reflects both your recent past and your immediate future. In short, these place cells in your brain may be more focused on tracking your planned and performed actions, rather than simply tracking specific space and time. Our brain is really amazing. These place cells also serve to establish memories, as if they had a coordinate system. It seems that evolution not only made us navigate that three-dimensional space, but for something much more important. Think of the cube, full of grid cells in your brain as little units that help you map two-dimensional abstract spaces. If we include sensory neurons or nerve cells in the skin, we obtain touch, the sense of hearing and smell. Everything goes through our mind. There is something outside of that space-time or that world that we see is real. Einstein thought that the perception of space and time are mental constructs, but he was not saying that the outside world is not real. He simply knew that there was something out there that existed and that our brain interprets and organizes it. It's as if we are deciphering patterns in the world around us. That's how fascinating our minds are. John O'Keefe, neuroscientist and winner of the Nobel Prize in Physiology and Medicine, defined true reality in this way. The world is a sea of energy of infinite dimensions. Animals and all beings on a similar evolutionary scale, we have systems that are sensitive to this sea of energy, and we turn them into a version of reality. Thus, our biology divided that sea of energy into objects and provided a three-dimensional scenario to locate them. There is no other better way to understand space-time. All our theories, laws, and perceptions are contained in that cube with cells, and that gives us the understanding that we are possibly building one of the many versions that the universe can have. This new knowledge of space, time, and the mind opens incredible paths in the development of artificial intelligence so that we can design robots that understand our world the way we do, and perhaps with new capabilities, unraveling new layers of reality.